6.4 base budget requests funding. Are there any items inside base budget funding that any member of council wishes to discuss separately? I'm not hearing any, so the block is moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. That's B1 through B15. Yes, the items on the agenda from through B15, less any numbers that aren't between the two of them. So I am looking at page 4, 5, and 6 on the agenda, and we have base budget requests funding.
Mm-hmm. So my pecuniary interest is B28. So should we separate that out?
It is not in this block.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
Yeah, always good to think to important things to flag. Moved and seconded, seeing no discussion. All those in favor? That's carried. That takes us to 6.5, base budget requests efficiency. That's items B16 through B21. Are there any items that council wishes to discuss separately? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? That's everyone. And that takes us to 6.6, base budget requests committed. There is one of those, so I will have that moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Any questions or discussion on B24? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving stuff to reserves to pay for things because we're a growing city? That's carried. Now, Councillor Bassick, we're in your territory. So we have base budgets recommended. I imagine there might be some discussion on a number of these items, so we'll just take them individually. First, we have item B25, asset management positions enterprise recovery. I'll get it on the floor. Is there a mover of that item? Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bassick. Any discussion on B25? I'm seeing lots of head shakes. Okay, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's carried. Next up is B27. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Everyone, Councillor Bassick. Any discussion on this? I note it's paired with the revenue item. All those in favor? That's carried. And now we'll watch Councillor Bassick depart for a lengthy discussion on item B28. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Haven't got you in there yet. Any discussion on City Studio program funding? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's all of us still here. And we'll welcome Councillor Bassick back. She gets her steps in today in a way that I will not, probably. That takes us to item B29, agreement with City of Kitchener for persons with disability services. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Very excited Councillor Hanmer is about this item. Any discussion about this item? No. Seeing none. I think we heard through business plans just exactly how far this goes and how important this work is. So all those in favor? That's carried. That takes us to item B30, Supervisor of Park Operations, moved by Councillor V, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Discussion on this item, Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's everyone. You had a question on the item just carried? On general, go ahead.
Well, I just wondered for this section, is it easier just to ask if anyone wants any of these pulled? Because I'm thinking they probably can go together. That's all. I mean, we knew that we needed one pulled, and I think, do we need one pulled out of this for you too? That's all. I thought, because I'm happy to.
So let me ask. We're now on top of page 9. We've got B31 until in the remaining section until B47. I'll ask council for items, and I'll wait. Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Chair Henry, I'd like to discuss item B32, B39 and B40. Please.
B39 and B40. Okay. So that's B32, B39, and B40. Any other items, council, and I'll wait. I'm not seeing any other items. I'm wanting to make sure everybody has an opportunity to not miss a note. So from B31 through B47, save and accept B32, 39, and 40. Do I have a mover for that? I'll take Councillor Bonagor maybe, since you're pulling the other ones, and then I'll take Councillor Freeman. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to item B32. Take us away, Councillor Bonagor, and I see Sunda is already ready. So go ahead.
Through you, Chair Henry. I just hoped to discuss this as one of the key reasons cited in the request was the renovated City Hall, but given that project is not going to be immediate, I'm wondering if we could delay this position, or I may not support it. I'm just putting it out there for discussion.
Staff recommendation is to have this position now. Here are the reasons. The real estate title may not be very suitable for that one. This position has got primarily two major functions. One is to bring in revenue or anchoring potential tenants so that we can increase the revenue levels through leasing. The second part to that one is there are service level agreements. There are several service level agreements that are presently not dedicated to any staff resources. The service level agreements are generally, you identify external parties to do the work. For instance, roof leak repairs or generator failures to attend. There are boiler, you can name it, there are more than 10 type of services. I could easily, it goes up to 20, 25. And these two functions, primarily the lease and the service level, these are generally got legal agreements that has got long-term impact. Not, if we don't pay enough attention to develop these agreements, it has a long-term impact financially and also with the service level. Right now, these two areas of responsibilities not dedicated to any single staff. So it is very, I would say it's a finite, not only it is from an environmental and social service level reduction, but it's a direct financial impact by not having a position of this nature.
So let me ask as follow-up to some of those. I'll look at Mr. Rapp. I know that one of the items that Sunda's noted in the budget sheet is land value appraisals, which are sourced externally. I'm aware that currently through Section 37 applications in our process, that's something we have to do. But the new community benefit charges, whatever the heck it will mean, we're going to be doing a lot more land value appraising as developments come by to do some of those. Mr. Rapp, I'm just wondering if you see this position as supporting planning in those respects, or whether we would still be sourcing that externally.
To Chair Henry, I do not necessarily see it supporting. That's a bit of a crystal ball gazing, because we don't know where we're going with the regulations on that. But as I'm aware of it today, I do not see it supporting that necessarily.
I was thinking it would be interesting. I got Councillor Vassic on the item.
Through you, Chair Henry. Can we anticipate any cost savings from this and any increased revenue from this position, by any chance?
Yes, definitely. There will be, we are anticipating at least an increase in 20% within the next 3 years. We see a 20% increase in our revenue line, and there will be a reduction in our cost. the service level agreements I may not have mentioned before. The service level agreements that if we introduce, we will be reducing staff hours, the frontline staff hours, by calling every time a potential contractor to come in. We will have an annual contractor to be assigned. That not only would save frontline staff time, that will also save procurement staff time, that will also save accounts payable staff time because of the number of bills that they have to process. There are some multiple benefits of having these service level agreements, and this position can be dedicated to these two major functions. Thanks.
It's helpful. I've got Mayor Jaworski and then Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you. Through the chair, I note in the budget issue paper near the bottom and also mentioned at the top, there's other consulting fees of $40,000 that go towards this. So it seems like there's an inherent cost savings that sort of pays for 1/3 of this position. Am I reading that correctly, Sunda?
Yes. So presently, we have a $40,000 budgeted within that portfolio. So that will be utilized to sort of top up this request. Yes, it will be. So the cost, say the cost is 130,000, it will be reduced by 40,000.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Through you, the Mayor has asked one of my questions, and my other read of this position was that it was also improving the efficiencies of some of the tasks as they currently are spread among a number of staff, so it would have it in one location. So in itself, there is some inherent savings, so to speak, or reallocation of work that people may need to do in other positions.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is very correct. And what we are doing is right now, these are picked up by staff who are in need for this kind of work. And now we are trying to establish a person with has got professional background to sort of develop agreements, understanding the real estate laws, and we will be able to do the same level of job at a much more higher diligence when we hire a professional person.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunda, through you, Chair. We've had in the past a person in this role before, correct?
So, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Just clarifying, we've had a person in this role in the past, maybe in part-time.
That's correct, but it's at a different capacity before. Right now, he was overseeing the existing setup, but what we are trying to do with this position is to go to the next level, and that's why we are particularly looking for a professional person in this area.
I'm not seeing any. Jaworski? No? Good. Okay. I was looking for any further discussion. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion? Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of B32, all those opposed, Councillor Bonagor, that's carried. Over the page, that takes us to item B39. And also B40, but I'll let you lead off, Councillor Bonagor.
Yes, through you, Chair Henry. I just wanted to bring these two up together, and I'm just curious. I know that these roles they do different functions, but they are linked. I'm just curious. Are both essential right now? Is one more essential than the other during this term?
Look to Max to speak to these two posts.
Through your chair, Henry, to Councillor Bolliger.
Perhaps, Max, if you could move to your right, closer to the mic, that would be great.
So currently, we have 2 network analysts supporting 47 backend applications. It's more like each person will have to cover 23 different systems. And if you compare with other aerometers, our regional peers, right? And Kitchener have. Give me a sec. The backend support, Kitchener have 9 full-time employees, and Cambridge have 3 full-time employees, and currently we only have 2. And from the business continuity perspective, right? And if one staff leave, and we're losing almost like 50% of the knowledge, so if we can have one more network analyst, it will support the organization much better. Also, the risk level will be reduced. And also, as I mentioned before, we have consolidated our telephone system from 16 facilities to one centralized systems in 2016. And before that, IMTS is only supporting the telephone system for City Hall. And after we consolidated all the telephone system together, we're supporting all 16 facilities. And originally, when I submit this budget request, it was a telecommunication analyst. And after that, we introduced the open text project. We found that we really need a dedicated person to support the open text into platform. So we merged these 2 requests into together. So we call it the network analyst, the same description, job description as the current 2 network analyst position. So this way we can let them, all 3 of them, to cover each other. I think that would be the better solution than request 2 separate the positions. Did I answer your question?
You did regarding the B39 with the network analyst. I'm just interested, so you've got the network analyst and the systems analyst coming forward. So I was just interested in essentially, how essential are they both? Is one more essential than the other for this term?
The reason we put the network analyst request in 2020 is I think we have an immediate need for that because the OpenText upgrade will be in March. So we really need 1 person to following that project. And the system analyst position is still very important. And so currently we have 94 systems. And we have 4 system analysts to support them. That's also each individual have to support 23 systems. And I understand that each system, some system is more complicated than the others. But if you're taking a look at the amount of the system we're managing, we're supporting, right? Sometimes it's very, very hard to allocate resources. For example, we recently working on the by law enforcement, the parking enforcement system, and the vendor support is not very efficient. So we're trying to rewrite some of the applications. So currently, I'm almost have 3 system analysts working on 1 applications to try to meet the deadlines to support the St. Patrick's Day event. And on the other example, the PeopleSoft system. We have PeopleSoft system for both finance and HRs. And last year, we did the PeopleSoft HR upgrade, and we have dedicated 1 resource on that. And this year, we're planning to another PeopleSoft finance system upgrade. And we have to dedicate one resource on that project as well. And another example, building permit public portal system. During the last year, we have countless meetings, and almost the whole IMTS team is supporting that one project. So with 4 system analysts, it's really, really, really hard for us to catch up. And the reason we put the system analyst in 2021 instead of 2020 is we do understand the pressure for the organization. We're willing to wait one more year to help the budget process.
And Ms. Patel has more information.
I would just like to summarize and provide some statistics that we did give even on the business planning day. Max had got the number of IMTS staffing in Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo as a comparator, and of course Kitchener is almost double our size. So to have an apples to apples comparison, we divided it by the population. So looking at the number of IMTS staff per 100,000 population, Kitchener is at 24.4 per 100,000 staff. 100,000 in population. Cambridge is at 23.1. Waterloo is at 15.1. So we are significantly understaffed in IMTS. So while I certainly do appreciate as to which one would be a higher priority, when I'm looking at it from a broader perspective, I think we are short-staffed in many areas in IMTS, and you're seeing it in the examples that Max mentioned in the delays in terms of implementing systems. So right now where we are looking at having portals and having residents being able to interface directly with online systems, a lot of those things are being delayed because IMTS support is not available to be able to deliver on it. So it's not just internal staff support, it is also starting to impact what we're able to do for the residents, and being in a tech community, I think it would be great if we could get some of our online portals up and going.
Okay, so I'll look for get something on the floor, perhaps both of them together since this is connected. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, B39 and B40, and seconded by Councillor Bodley. Further discussion, Mayor Jaworski.
Well, I think if we look at OpenText, it is our core system. We're undergoing an upgrade. And if you do some of the math on some of these back-end systems and you look and see that, essentially each of our staff members has about 7 or 8 hours a month to dedicate to a certain system or a certain thing that they're working on. That's not a lot of time. And so I think that in terms of us moving forward as a smart city, we see the provincial government funding for new efficiencies coming through, that we just received that information. There'll be possibilities of moving forward on other smart city initiatives, and I think we need to be prepared for that. Hopefully we'll see further provincial government funding for those efficiencies.
Further discussion, Councillor Freeman.
Yeah, I guess further to the mayor's comments, I'm willing to support these two positions from a number of perspectives, and I think one of them is that a lot of the systems we have are capable of doing perhaps a lot more than what we're getting out of them right now, just because of the fact that we don't have the ability to upgrade them as fast. PeopleSoft in particular is a very robust system, I think that IMTS have driven some of the efficiencies that we've recognized in the city over time. And so I have a strong feeling that these positions will, in essence, pay for themselves over time. So.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote on B39 and B40. All those in favor? That's everyone. Thank you very much for the very detailed information, Max. I learned a lot about how we're supporting all of these just now that I don't think have gotten exposure to at that level of detail. So that was very helpful. Okay, so that takes us to the bottom of page 11 of our agenda and the top of page 12. We're into operating impacts of capital and growth requests. Starting with 6.8, those items that Council has previously committed to by resolution. And that's G1 through G4. I'll take them together. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Veith. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I think we've said lots of things about the library in the past that we can go back to comments on. All those in favor? That's carried. We've got a happy chief librarian in the back on that one. That takes us to section 6.9, operating impacts of capital and growth recommended. And remember, Council, these are the connected pieces where we're getting the capital project that drives the operating line at the top. I'll take them individually for clarity, since the motions themselves are bulky enough for us to keep track of. I'll look for a mover of G5, moved by Councillor Vasek, who I think loves all things art, seconded by Councillor Bonagor, who trails Vasek not by much on the love of all things art. Any discussion on G5? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. That takes us to item G6, the operating impacts of capital, West Side Employment Land Servicing, which includes a new road on some of these. So I will take Councillor Bodley moving that item on behalf of his beleaguered residents in Vista Hills that just want another way out, and Councillor Hammer, who they will drive to on all of those. And any discussion on if they don't stop at Costco first? They will stop at Costco first. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. That takes us to item G7, the operating impacts of the dedicated museum website and the non-routine associated item that council reclassified. Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Any discussion on this item, council? Councillor Bodley?
Through you, Chair Henry, is this part of the discussion of the 5 items with respect to website funding that we were supposed to receive information on? Is this tied into that in any way?
I see Tony approaching the podium.
Through you, Councillor Henry, Councillor Bodley. This is actually a separate request. The item that was asked about earlier about the corporate. Sorry, I'll repeat that. This is a separate request. The capital refresh dollars are not contemplated to be used for the museum integration. This money would be required to help deliver a more robust experience for museum patrons. The way the website is currently constituted, it can't do some of the functionality that's required by the museum. So this would be within the website envelope. It's not a separate website. What form it would take, we would have to work with the vendor to determine what would be the best, most cost-efficient way to do that.
Follow up, and then we'll keep going around.
Sorry, Councillor. Yep, thank you. I just note that it's in 2020. Do we anticipate pending approval of the capital budget item that this will be up and running in 2020, or is it possible that this could be deferred into 2021?
Through you, Chair Henry, to the Councillor, it would be our hope that we could get it running in 2020. It certainly would depend on working with the vendor, working with Karen's team as well at the museum to see if we can get it up and running. But that would be our hope, is to have something live by later this year.
And certainly support and servicing fees aren't really prorated up front when you get into this. So even if it's December 30th, we got a bill.
You noted it.
Councillor Freeman?
Through Chair Henry, I'm looking at museum staff and Mr. Bowman. We had a conversation about this funding the other day. Is it okay if I share some of the things that you shared with me in that conversation? Yeah, so one of the things that struck me that helped me to understand the value of this funding was the museum seeking opportunities to, I guess, create a virtual display of a lot of the collection pieces that they can't have out all the time. And that they said that there have been people that have reached out to the museum from other parts of the world. And I guess when I think about it, like there's a lot of museums where you can actually review the collection prior to going and then calling ahead to say, do you think that these pieces could be available for me to see when I come? And that was helpful for me to kind of get a sense of where this is going. So it would also be more of a digital documentation of the collection that probably will bring a bigger value outside of just being a website piece. So that was helpful for me to better understand that. And I just thought I'd share that.
I appreciate that being shared, and certainly since we lack the space at the moment for a permanent sort of display, a permanent exhibit, that's also one of the, I think, factors for people being able to access. Councillor Bonagor?
Through you, Chair Henry, just to follow up on Councillor Freeman's comments, I I love the idea of this website being available for school kids in the city to do research projects as part of their kind of civics classes. So I think this does have a real lot of value for the community.
And thanks to current developments in the school sector, people can do this at home while they have extra time on their hands. Visit the museum at your fingertips. I think that could, who knows how long this will last. Maybe the website will be up in time. Did I have this moved and seconded yet, Julie? Yes, I did. Okay. So any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's everyone. Thank you. And that takes us to G8. There is a lot in G8, so I'll point us through there. The first thing to note is there were reclassifications that happened here. There was the funding transfer that Council approved last week between Alexander Park and the various splash pads. Council saw in Ms. Patel's opening presentation the construction price index, so if we're wondering where the dollars are needed and why on that, that shouldn't be surprising now that we've seen a 5% number. So those are already contained within the recommendation before us, but the decision point that we have is at the end of the motion at the bottom of page 16 of the agenda, which is related to the Waterloo Park Master Plan information. Council had directed an exploration of the reduction overall, but seeking further information on what that would mean in terms of park scope and operations. So before getting into the item, I'll look for our Parks Director to provide us that further information. Come forward, Mr. Silcox-Childs.
Good morning, Chair Henry, Mr. Mayor, members of Council. Just to provide you with a quick update on the motion from last week. There's a couple a couple of main impacts that I'll focus in on. The first one is reducing the capital budget down to $500 per year for the Waterloo Park implementation is essentially equivalent to about one of our planned capital projects that would have taken place during this budget cycle. So the removal of those funds would equate to one less sort of park-wide capital project. Now, staff have reviewed the projects that are sort of on the pending list, and as an example, we proposed that the Waterloo Park circuit, which is the pedestrian link that joins the east and west sides, that is about equivalent to the funding drop. So that's an example. Now, I want to also point out that the priority exercise is completed through Waterloo Park Advisory Committee with staff. So the ultimate decision would come back to Council with their report, which is typically Q2, usually March, potentially Q1 of this year. So that's the impact of Waterloo Park. Did you want me to carry on with the splash pad, or?
I think we sort of already made that direction last week, so I don't think there was further information we were expecting on that item. Okay, to Council, we already got that last week. But the question is just on the impact of the reduction of the Waterloo Park Master Plan implementation. There are questions about that. I'll start with Councillor Vasek. I'll go back here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, and maybe this was here, so apologies if I missed it. How many projects per year will still go ahead? Like how many capital projects?
Sure. Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Vasek, it's going to vary year by year, depending on the size of them. I would say typically 2, possibly 3 projects per year through the Waterloo Park implementation. Now, keep in mind there's also other capital projects that are happening in Waterloo Park that are separate from this.
Okay, I've got, I assume, Councillor Bonagor and then Councillor Hammer. Okay, then I've got Councillor Hammer.
Thank you, Chair Henry, through you, to Jeff. Just for clarification, then, really in prioritizing the projects, I think what I'm hearing you say is that the dollar amount that we are allocating, the committee will then prioritize which of the projects go ahead. And so, in essence, they will eventually all get completed, but not necessarily in this term of council. And we still are having citizen input on what needs to happen first.
Through you, Chair Henry, that is correct.
Okay.
So any projects that aren't completed because of this are simply pushed out of this budget cycle.
the piece that I really like about your response is that it is citizen input on which ones go forward. So I certainly will support it. Thanks.
Are there other questions for Jeff at this time? Mine would be on overall capacity in environment and parks. I know council in the last budget loaded your division with a heck of a lot of work over a shorter period of time to deliver key priorities in terms of splash pads and moving up other elements. I know that later today we'll be discussing both preventative maintenance changes as well as infrastructure changes and increases in work that would also impact division. So can you speak to the extent to which this kind of slight reduction for the first few years would be helpful or would impact your ability to deliver internally on more of the work that's coming your way?
Certainly. You're not incorrect. Certainly staff capacity is one of our main concerns in environment and parks. We have a number of contract positions as well as some full-time positions, but the amount of work that is needing to be done, especially in the first part of this capital 10-year cycle, is high. So in essence, this will alleviate some of that pressure. I can share with you as well that we're exploring different options for staffing to provide the project management for those capital projects and getting creative when we need to.
Yeah, I think that's probably also good context for council, because I was remembering reports back we received, I think November, on overall capacity on delivering infrastructure investments, and EPS was highlighted as an area where more is going to be more challenging than in other places. So I just thought I'd bring that back in front of us. So before I put what I assume is the recommendation that includes the 1.5 rather than the 2.3 there, I assume I'll get mover and seconder. Brad, Felipe, can you give us some indication of any reduction in operating impact we can take off the top by doing that?
Yes, through Chair Henry. So we have worked with Jeff and the park staff, and so we had confirmed that there was no operating savings as a result of the reallocation between Alexandra Park and the splash pads, as that was more of a decision around the capital cost to construct, one going up, one going down. However, if we do reduce the capital funding for reference 252, the Waterloo Park, park staff has confirmed that the operating impact will go down by $3,500 in each year, 2021 and 2022. So what we would propose, if that's the motion council put forward, is that we would change this to a G8R, and we can make that change right on the screen. So it would be a 7,000 reduction spread out over years 2 and 3.
Should know that before they moved something, since so I assume Councillor Bonagor will move and Councillor Freeman will second the option that is the second option under 252 for the capital line, and that the operating increase, it's now G8R, and those are 3,500 less in 2021 and 2022. So now we'll do, that's been moved and seconded. I'll look for comments. Councillor Bonagor, then Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Chair Henry, I just really want to thank staff for working with us on this. At the start of our budget discussions, I was asking you all to look for places where we could slow down. And I think this is one where we can very smartly slow down a bit. This moderate reduction can put some money back that can be shared across the rest of the city in other places of need. So I really want to thank you for working towards this and getting us to this point.
And then I have Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. Yeah, I also wanted to thank the ward councillor too for recognizing that, you know, when money is literally being allocated in your ward, like it's hard to give it back. So I just wanted you to know that I really appreciate that. And I do really appreciate how you shaped the conversation around this today. And you know, I guess for me, recognizing that there was a large article in the paper with regard to storage requirements more broadly across the city, this change will be able to reallocate some money back to the reserve fund, from which once that storage work is undertaken, it will support that. And so that's going to really help me more broadly to support the storage requirements that we need across the city, because it's not quite the same amount of money, but it's pretty darn close. So thank you.
Further comments, Council? As I'd echo that as we seek to do more rehabilitation, doing a little bit less new in terms of growth activity, not only is providing staff with the capacity to deliver on residents' expectations, but it's striking a balance that aligns with where council is looking to go on behalf of the community. And I think that's helpful for us to be able to be clear with staff on how we see the right balance being struck. So moved and seconded, discussed. I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's everyone. And that brings us to the top of page 17 on our agenda, item G9, which is linked to capital reference 273. Do I have a mover for that item? Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any comments or questions on this item? Just letting everybody turn their pages and catch up. There's a lot of pages under G8. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? That's everyone. That takes us to G10. Council, this one isn't linked to current capital reference item, but one we'd already approved. And we'll see tenders back shortly for delivering on that. So a mover for the rec complex up. I see Councillor Bodley and Councillor Freeman. Any comments on or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's everyone. That takes us to G11, the fiber network infrastructure operating impacts of capital. It's linked to one capital project. Look for a mover of this item. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Veith. Any questions or comments on this underground infrastructure? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's everyone. Now we're on page 18. That's item G12, infrastructure virtualization operating impacts of capital. And capital reference 447. Do I have a mover of this item? Moved by Councillor Bonagora, seconded by Councillor Freeman. I recall noting with Max at business plan items that this is one of those smart city efficiencies that has some great opportunity to help close some of the IMTS infrastructure gap as we rely on fewer hard pieces of infrastructure that his team has to support and manage. Any comments or questions on this item other than me just blathering on up here? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That brings us to item G13, fleet equipment expansion, operating impacts of capital, and the associated fleet equipment expansion. I'll get this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. I haven't gone over there in a while. Questions or comments on this item? I pause a bit more when I know we had discussion on business planning days on items that are before us. So seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Bonagor. Okay. That carries. That takes us to item G14. A lot of numbers in that one. Moved by Councillor Freeman, who loves talking about government overhead. I remember many budget cycles talking about government overhead with Councillor Freeman. Seconded by Councillor Bodley. Really great topics we get into. I see folks watching us. Really exciting stuff, government overhead coverage. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to item G15, associated with 551. Councillor Freeman? Dirt thing. Okay, that civil engineers have to love their dirt. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Vasek. I like dirt. And it needs places to go. Questions on this item or comments? Again, I paused because we discussed these before. All those in favor? That's everyone. Some important things just aren't sexy, but that doesn't make them less important. And that, speaking of engineering things and things that aren't sexy, but very important, operating impacts of engineering services capital projects associated with, as you would expect, a number of engineering projects across several pages. Do I have a mover for G16? Yeah, sure, but I'll get moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Veith, Councillor Freeman.
I wanted to point out under these operating impacts of engineering services, like this is an example where there's a lot of work that's being done where it's not being specifically identified as supporting active transportation, but it does. And so I just wanted to bring that to council's attention because there has been some commentary out more broadly on social media about how much we're spending on active transportation, but those numbers were targeting only things in the budget that are listed as active transportation, as opposed to a lot of the work that we're doing that implements our policies around active transportation, namely complete streets. And so if anyone's interested, like I actually did a list of how many projects that we're doing as a city throughout all of our departments that will actually extend our active transportation network substantially. And some of them fall under parks, some of them fall under engineering, and so on. And so I just wanted to seize this opportunity to bring that to your attention.
I think that's helpful, and if you have time to sort of encapsulate that and share that on those same networks people can have, I know we'd love to like and retweet that information. Thank you for the work on all of that, because compiling that information can be challenging. Further comments on this item? Seeing none, taking the vote on G16, all those in favor? That's everyone. That takes us to the top of page 21. Item G17, operating impacts of planning capital projects. And there are three items in here in terms of capital reference. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Veith. Question from Councillor Freeman.
So a couple comments. So one, again, the station area planning, that is going to create frameworks and rules by which we do extend our active transportation commitments through our area transit area planning. So I just wanted, again, to flag that. But the other thing is the work that we're doing in the Uptown Public Realm. I just wanted to put it out there about things like naming. I don't want to call it naming rights, but actually naming things. Like there was the water feature, for example, in Waterloo Park was always something that Mayor Halloran really, really wanted to see done. And so I wanted to put that out there to see whether there might be a time for us to have a conversation as a council around when we make capital investments, whether we want to recognize some volunteer service that's happened in past years. Even things like putting the splash pad in right next to Sunnydale, like we might want to call it the Laurie Strome splash pad, or and I'm just like I'm just putting that out there because when I see these investments, people now refer to downtown Kitchener as Carlsbad Square, and I just want to put it out there for people to think about, and not for today, obviously, but just to think about.
I imagine there would be at a later time a lively discussion on how that would work, but I see staff noting that, and we'll see when an appropriate time is to have those conversations. Some of them can be very, very sensitive and have very strong views on some of those, but I think the point is well taken. Other discussion on this item? I have Councillor Bonigar.
I just, through you, Chair Henry, I just wanted to call out the Uptown Public Realm project as well, the implementation. It's going to be a key part of making the core of the city a really human place. So I'm very excited to see the funding come forward for this as we really build a really holistic and supportive centre for the entire city.
So noted. Any further discussion on G17? I am seeing none. All those in favor? That's all of us. That takes us to the bottom of page 21, item G18, operating impacts of transportation capital projects. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. And before folks get there, I'll note that the first capital item called out is Waterloo's first WUNIF. I was at, Finn and I were at the public consultation session. We saw Councillor Vasic there. She tried to help me keep things out of his hands that he wasn't supposed to touch. Didn't always work very well. The pictures of the furnishings are less exciting to touch than the actual furnishings will be when we get them there. But we had an absolutely massive response in terms of folks attending that session. We finally got the mix right of where and when to be able to get students to stop and give us their feedback. Turns out it's the prospect of maybe having a coffee. And that was all it took to get lineups upon lineups upon lineups of folks come through at lunch to be able to give us some very detailed feedback on what they're looking to see both there and in the park. So that was heartening for me to see, and I appreciate staff's work on being creative on those public engagement opportunities. I have Councillor Freeman first.
Oh, just the same comment. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that transportation services are uplifting again, our active transportation network, closing gaps, building more kilometers, and so it's exciting.
And I saw your hand, Councillor Bonnegar. Nope, we're good. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's all of us. And that takes us to the end of base and operating impacts of capital, and I would flag to council as we note this that when we talk about council's policy around the role of inflation in dealing with the budget process and that's for base and operating impacts of capital, which we have now concluded. So as we see the numbers at the top and we see them in the presentations we'd had today, this is the inflation or slightly below inflation targets that we were looking for, and now it's a question of what additional services, what more do we need to do to be able to deliver on the strategic plan that our citizens want. So that's the break in the day. I wanted to take a pause to just sort of flag that and note that we are on policy in that respect. Now I need to get things off my screen so I can figure out where the heck we are. Okay. This takes us to service level changes. And we'll take these individually, of course. Item S1 is the first one that's here. Discussion on S1. Councillor Bonnegar.
Through you, Chair Henry. Given that this is a new event and we are not entirely certain as a city which direction this event will end up taking, I would like to see this be 3 years of annual funding rather than flat out ongoing from the start. So I'm just proposing that and wondering if that would be possible.
My finance staff are certainly nodding. I mean, they're one-time items, and as you saw in your budget book, these automatically back out if they're done that way, and they have to be brought forward separately. So that could happen at the end of 3 years, I assume. Brad?
Yes, so through Chair Henry to Councillor Bonnegar, we could make S1 a 3-time one-time. So it'll have a 100,000 impact in year 1. It'll have 0 and 0 in years 2 and 3 as it'll reverse in and out and reverse in and out. And then what we would see in year 1 of the next budget would be a starting point of negative 100,000, at which point council would then have the conversation around continuing that or making it ongoing funding at that time. So that's what we could do if it was on the operating tax base side. Alternatively, it could be funded from an alternative reserve source, which would take it out of operating today, and it would be funded through another means, which I think it's been suggested, maybe council contingency, which we could provide an update on that status if council was interested. But if we left it operating, the numbers you see would basically be what you see. It just would be changed to one time instead of ongoing.
Thank you. I mean, the reason I would like to explore that route is really it gives us a chance to assess after like 2 or 3 events, assess the events, see which way they're going. We may decide to change direction. We may decide to continue and invest more. It just gives us that opportunity to, with a plan to pause and reflect.
I've got Mayor Jaworski.
Just on that plan, I think I have a question from a business perspective, not just finance perspective. On the $100,000, one of the challenges I see is that, number one, we boot it to the next term of council. They start out with a minus $100,000, which I'm not particularly fond of because I don't see Canada Day in and of itself going away. We saw it as our largest ever engagement on in what people want in our community. So I would see it probably going up, not down. I don't know if we can get any sponsorship. But the business question really is, if we're putting in $100,000 for 3 years, we're going to build up expertise and capacity internally. However, that capacity could disappear on us in, say, year 2.5 when they see that this hasn't been renewed, it's being booted to a next council, nobody knows what's happening. I'm just wondering about the concerns of that. From our staff concerned about that this program might only have a 3-year lifespan, and it makes it very much harder for staff who are actually on the ground to plan for this when it's going to be over a term of council that we might not know what the next term of council will do.
I'll look to Estero to respond on the business side.
Through you, Chair Henry, to Mayor Jaworski, you do raise a good point. I think it does become difficult for staff to plan the event in year 4 if we don't know what that budget is going to be. I don't see it having an impact on staff capacity. It is about future planning, though, and any longer-term commitments that we're hoping to look into for potential cost savings down the road.
Just to follow up on that, so if we were to fund it simply for 3 years, years 1, 2, and 3, that means in 2022 we're having a Canada Day. You will have capacity to plan for the 2023 one for the last 6 months of 2022, not knowing that the next term of council may not fund it. So it'd be a waste of time.
Through you, Chair Henry, that's correct.
I'll look to Ms. Patel has further information, perhaps clarifying on the finance side.
Through you, Chair Henry, I do agree with what Mayor just mentioned, that in planning in 2023, the funding wouldn't be there. The only point I wanted to make is that if we choose not to fund it from a reserve and it is being funded from taxes, even though if it is a one-time, it will not have any negative impact in 2023 because we would have raised the money for it right now, if we choose to fund it from taxes. Yes. If we choose to fund from reserves, then yes, it's a pressure that's been deferred to 2023. So just wanted to put that in context. So we could still keep it as one time, still fund it through taxes. Then the concern that remains is that in 2022, when planning for 2023, there is no assurance that the funding is there, which is the point that you just raised there.
So based on that, I think my preference would be, instead of delivering next term of council minus $100,000 gap, that we let the next term of council decide they want to cancel Canada Day and save $100,000 and use that towards budget pressures or whatever. But I think that we shouldn't deliver the next term of council a starting gap.
So I think I'm hearing the mayor opposed to funding it from reserves because those comments aren't consistent with funding at one time because
Correct.
the budget room would exist.
Yeah, correct. Well, also just the consistency of the budget planning.
I've got Councillor Bonagor, and then I'll figure out what to do in terms of what to let go on the floor.
Through you, Chair Henry. I see the points and I think they're valid. I'm just concerned that we are making policy decisions through the budget process, and I don't know if that's entirely the right way around. Through this funding setup, we are essentially saying the city will be running this henceforth because, you know, you raise the concerns of will staff be able to deliver it, but we haven't made the decision as a council yet that we are going to be hosting it forevermore. We may decide in 2 or 3 years' time that this is the kind of event that maybe a community group would want to run with support from us, which would probably come with some funding. You are correct. But my concern is really just, I don't think we as a council have set this as a forever ongoing policy. So that's where I'm concerned about the forever ongoing funding.
So I'll take Councillor Vasa, Councillor Hanmer so far.
Okay, through you, Chair Henry. I'm not clear about what you're suggesting, which is how would the next council revisit it and decide to kick it off? I think that's also I think both are tough positions to put a future council in. One would be to start with a minus 100,000. perhaps, and one would be to take away something. I don't think, so I think both are kind of crappy situations for, I mean, you can quote that crappy, but like are not great situations to put a future council in. But so I just need more clarity on what you're suggesting, Mayor, which is at what point would the next council have to kind of take it back?
Well, I think, if anything, I have it a little bit wrong in terms of, what would be the pressure in that. But I do think from a planning perspective that this is something that I particularly don't see going away. And, Councillor Bonnegar raises some good questions. This arrived in our lap a year and a half ago. How long will it stay? I think that the way I see it, though, I don't see a lot of other people in the community wanting to run this, and we see a lot of other volunteers and things seeing challenges, so maybe I should just go on that part of the argument. But
and I'll go to Councillor Henry, but I just want to flag, if you've got minus 100,000 as a stick, please put that out of your head. That's good accounting talk from Brad for how this would manage in finance. If it wasn't funded from reserve, but funded 3 times one time, the room would be created in the operating budget. It would exist. There is no pressure. It would simply be confirmed either as continuing one time or as ongoing and have no net budget impact in 2023. So do not put that in your head unless you're thinking of funding it from reserves. So don't let that be the barrier in your head for thinking about what Councillor Bonnegar is saying. Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry. I guess I'm kind of in the middle with this one. The way that I'm viewing this is Canada Day is not going to go away. And so there needs to be some kind of funding that goes along with it. I'm not seeing us putting the money in the budget precluding a conversation about are we the best to continue doing it, because I'm presuming that after each event, we'll have a report back on how did it go? Are we still in a position to keep going? So I think purely from a planning standpoint, it is important for us to be earmarking dollars to go ahead with it, and knowing that we've always got that opportunity to look and say, maybe this isn't something for us to continue on, but at least we are able to be planning it and in a much better position. So I'm comfortable with the way it's been presented to us at this stage.
Okay, so I've got to figure out what to put on the floor. I had a suggestion that came first, but I've got a printed agenda. Go ahead.
Through you, Chair Henry. In which case, given the discussion, I'm happy to go back to having it as ongoing funding. I shall retract my original suggestion if that makes your life easier, Chair Henry. Okay. But I would like just staff to know that I would be looking for a very robust report after at least 2 city-run events, so that we as a council can help make a decision as to how to go forward.
So I'll see Councillor Bonnegar move a motion perhaps that says, and that, staff be directed to report back after 2021 on the future of Canada Day, or some wording to that effect.
And I'd be happy to second that motion, because we do need the report back.
Okay, I'll give the clerk a second. Councillor Veith.
Yeah, just a comment that this is a really important event for our community, and I'm really happy that the city has, our staff have stepped up to fill the gap that U of W has left behind. And clearly it's not something that U of W, they're in education, not putting on parties. So and I believe that the community wants this, and it's something that's really important, and it's not going away. So happy.
Okay, seeing no further comments, nobody itching to get in, I'll take the vote then. All in favor? That's everyone. Good discussion. Item S2, I will take Councillor Freeman moving that motion, because it's library again, and seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any questions on this? This is the last piece of the broader library funding strategy that the last council set in motion. Councillor Freeman.
Again, I just wanted to thank staff for basically creating this tool, like this way of funding the operating and creating this opening within the operating budget to make this happen. I think this was innovative funding, and I appreciate it.
I know staff take that back. It was a lot of hard work to figure out how to make this happen, and 2018 provided us a few extra dollars that helped kickstart the ability to get this done. Looking for approval then. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, now I think our chief librarian can be even happier. That was the last item in that respect. Item S3, Director of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives. I assume we'll just get that on the floor. Councillor Bodley was very interested last year, so I'll have him move it. Seconded by Councillor Vasic. Discussion, Council? I see Councillor Vasic, then other people.
Okay, through you, Chair Henry. I wanted to speak because this was one I voted against last year, and I have since talked to several staff at various levels at the organization, because I think one of the pieces that people give feedback about, residents give feedback about, is, oh, are you just adding management to an inefficient bureaucracy? That's what people are really frustrated about. And so that wasn't why I voted against it, but it is a concern that residents have. And so as I talked to people at various different levels, I really got a sense of how crucial a role like this is in order to really push forward some of the key strategic initiatives that we have. In particular, one half of this job will largely go towards our sustainability initiatives. And so if we really, really want to make headway on that, this is really an investment in that. And then on the other level, it will also promote the Lean Six Sigma program, which will find efficiencies in ways within the organization we can find efficiencies, but then across different municipalities. So I'm really pleased to support this, and I've done a lot of work to understand the benefits to the organization and to the community.
Okay, then I have Councillor Freeman and then Councillor Bonigar.
I was thinking that Councillor Bonigar was going first. I don't know why. I guess I just had a question to the CAO. And later under the menu items, M1, there is a request for an energy manager. And I just didn't know whether there's any chance that there could be some overlaps, because recognizing what Councillor Vasic said in terms of the focus on sustainability and climate, like what I think about when I think about sustainability is climate adaptation and resiliency, and so I would think that GHG emissions or greenhouse gas emission reductions would fall within that. And I know that last year we funded a mechanical engineer, and that the high level conversation around that position within last year's menu paper and the conversation around the council table was that mechanical engineer would be supporting in particular reduction in greenhouse gases for our building holdings and that kind of thing. So I just didn't know if between this position and last year's funded mechanical engineer, which is a full-time on staff, whether we can achieve what was intended through M1.
Through you, Chair Henry, maybe I'll start that one. Certainly if Sunda or Mark want to layer in too with respect to M1. The Director of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives, I think Councillor Vasic summarized it very nicely. It has kind of two targeted directions. It's certainly around the sustainability agenda, and it's something we've aspired to get back at a higher level in the organization for a number of years. We did have some external expertise through an organizational consultant called KPMG that was looking at the positioning of our efforts around sustainability and really saw a gap in the way that governance-wise we're coordinating our efforts. With respect to M1, if that position is successful later today, we too talked about that internally. As council knows, the level of emissions and our impact on the environment is pretty high from the facilities area, and there's a lot of workload expectations at the detailed level for that energy manager position. I think at the director level, it's a higher level of coordination amongst all of the departments and integration with our external partners, whether that be the region of Waterloo, the universities, Union Gas, Waterloo North Hydro. So I see totally an internal working team that would include that energy manager, likely others from across the corporation in IPPW and the other departments as well. But certainly, I see this director position operating at a little bit more of a corporate level than the energy manager role.
I think that's useful clarity. I have Councillor Bonagor next on S3.
Through you, Chair Henry, and this is really a question for Mr. Anderson. So I was also one of the people who did not support this position last year, partly because to me at the time it seemed a little vague. But over the past year, there's been a lot of discussion about how this position could really be best used, and I think tying it to our strategic plan and having this person being the champion of our strategic plan is going to be very powerful. And this is the most senior new position that we're being asked to approve. So I'm just hoping that you could maybe explain for any of the great hordes of people watching, just if you could outline what this position would look like beyond our term, like going forward, what's the intent of this role?
And just as a note, Mr. Anderson, there are 10 people watching, I'm told. Mr. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Henry, and that's great too. Hello to the audience. No, certainly our efforts, like many master plans, the sustainability agenda item within our strategic plan, it's been there for a number of council terms, and it's not something that will start and end in one council term. So I do envision that will still be a valid priority for the corporation as we move forward into the next term of council and many others in the future. We do have the corporate climate adaptation plan. We do owe council reports on our progress on that front. We have the climate emergency motion, the notion of carbon budgeting, the feasibility around that, and just how it might be deployed in the future. So those are just a couple of examples. Of course, many of them will require more consideration by council as we go forward. But I certainly see the sustainability side of the work plan going well into the future. The Lean Six Sigma portion, we do see this as early on in the role being an area of expertise that can be perhaps pivoted over the course of time as we build up our capacity across all the teams in the city. And so there might be some opportunity to reshift on priorities on the Lean Six side, but early on for the foreseeable future, that's a culture change too for our organization, and one that does require dedicated resources to help drive it.
And then I have Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. This is maybe just to further on the comment from Councillor Vasic around this being a position of leadership and bureaucracy, and looking at that in a negative light. For me, I'm looking at this from the opposite side of things, particularly when it comes to sustainability initiatives. We have a lot of people in the organization today who are working hard on some of these issues, but they don't have the leadership within the CAO's office with the authority to be able to put in place some of the great initiatives that they're working on. And I believe and hope that that's what this position is going to achieve, as opposed to being leaderless. We will now have some leadership on an issue that I know we all around the council horseshoe here have identified as being extremely important.
Other comments on this council? Then I'll go back to Councillor Freeman.
Well, I think just the other piece last year I don't think I supported this either, and one of the reasons was too is we hadn't completed our strategic plan, right? So we've completed a strategic plan. As a council, we've identified some of these elements within this position as being strategically important to the community and to council, and for those to advance it seems as though we need a director to advance those pieces. So I'm willing to support this as well.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. But before I take the vote, I'll just sort of note on the environmental side of this, dating back to the council immediately prior to when I joined, 06 to 2010, had flagged an Office of Sustainability Initiatives as a wish list item that never managed to work its way through the process. This is more robust and broader, and now we have broader context around some of this, but some of the ideas behind it have been long coming. And I think now is the day when we need to move forward and and work on it together. So seeing that, all those in favor? That's everyone. And I'll take one more item. I understand there's some lunch, and I'll take one more item before a break. And I'll look at S4, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Any discussion on this? Councillor Freeman.
Through Chair Henry. As of late, I've found that there have been a lot more work that's more broadly happening in this department. And I can't help but think of the dog committee that Councillor Hanmer and I sit on. Like, the number of people who are appealing decisions by the Humane Society has really increased. And it uses a lot of city resources to defend, support the committee, and so on. Like, staff have been very busy, and the last time our legal counsel to the committee was Mr. White, and so it makes sense to consider increasing support to this team. And I know that they want to undertake changes to our site plan approvals, and I received some more information on that offline, and I wanted to share with council that work could actually really better align how the approvals process works in other municipalities within the region. In some places, you can get something called site plan approval in principle, which allows you to move forward with some of your other development applications. And here in Waterloo, we've typically not allowed approval in principle. You either have it or you don't. And so that could be really useful work in terms of supporting our planning team to move that ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Through you, I was going to echo Councillor Freeman's comments regarding the increased support that specifically the Designated Dog Committee has been having, and we really appreciate that. I'd also just like to remind our colleagues that we've asked staff to do a number of reviews of processes and pieces and policies, which will require some legal input, and I would fully support us having that internal support and resources. So I think it is a good direction for us to go, and we are growing in a number of ways. I would also echo that many of our processes can be improved if we can be able to do some research of what's happening in other jurisdictions and put it in place.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's carried. And with that, I'm informed that lunch is available and served, and I would seek to break now. I'd have waited for a while, but I can't wait any longer myself. So we're looking at, hopefully we can be back in here at 1 o'clock. I imagine that may squeeze to 1:15, but hopefully we can, if we try for 1, we'll be here by 1:15.